Greetings, brave warriors and shield maidens. If you seek the strength and wisdom of the ancient Vikings, you've come to the right place. Don't waste time. Subscribe to the channel now and join our horde to strengthen this community of true Vikings. As you can see, our channel is new, so your subscription is crucial to our growth. If you're a true fan of the Vikings, show your support. Let the power of the Viking axe guide your hand to click the like button, and in the comments, tell us which city you're watching from so we know where in the world our stories are reaching, all because the salty breeze carried the scent of adventure as Kjartan the Navigator stood at the edge of the bustling Norse port of Nidaros. His weathered hands gripped the worn wooden railing, eyes fixed on the horizon where the sea met the sky. The port buzzed with activity, merchants haggling over goods, sailors preparing their ships, and the constant rhythm of hammers on wood as shipwrights worked tirelessly. Kjartan's reverie was broken by a familiar voice. Still dreaming of far-off lands, old friend? He turned to see Leif Erikson, son of Eric the Red, approaching with a grin that didn't quite reach his eyes. Leif, what brings you to Nidaros? Kjartan clasped his friend's arm in greeting. Leif's expression grew somber. I bring grave news from Greenland, Kjartan. The colony my father established. We've lost contact. No ships have returned in 2 winters. Kjartan's heart quickened. Lost contact? But surely, the last ship that attempted the journey returned with tales of impenetrable ice and eerie mists, Leif continued, his voice low. They speak of curse and ill fortune. Kjartan's mind raced with possibilities. The colony in Greenland had always been a precarious endeavor, but to lose all contact? It was unthinkable. What do you propose? Kjartan asked, already knowing the answer in his bones. Leif met his gaze steadily. I need someone to lead an expedition. Someone with the skill to navigate those treacherous waters and the courage to face whatever awaits. I need you, Kjartan. The words hung in the air between them, heavy with implication. Kjartan felt the familiar surge of excitement mixed with trepidation. This was no mere trading voyage or raid. This was a journey into the unknown, fraught with danger and mystery. Give me until sundown to consider, Kjartan replied, his voice betraying his inner conflict. As Leif nodded and took his leave, Kjartan found himself drawn to the Temple of Odin at the edge of the port. The weathered stone structure stood as a testament to the enduring faith of his people. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of burning herbs and the low chanting of priests. Kjartan approached the central altar, where a grizzled old priest named Thorvald tended the eternal flame. What troubles you, Kjartan the Navigator? Thorvald asked without turning, his voice as rough as the stones beneath their feet. I am called to a perilous journey, old friend, to find a lost colony in the icy reaches of Greenland. Thorvald turned, his one good eye gleaming in the firelight. Ah, so the whispers are true. Eric's folly has finally succumbed to the giants of ice and snow. Kjartan frowned. You speak as if their fate is already sealed. The Norns weave as they will, Kjartan, but perhaps your thread is meant to intertwine with theirs. Thorvald reached into the folds of his robe and produced a small, intricately carved wooden amulet. Take this. It carries Odin's blessing for travelers and seekers of wisdom. As Kjartan's fingers closed around the amulet, a sense of calm settled over him. His path was clear. The rest of the day passed in a flurry of activity. Word spread quickly of Kjartan's impending voyage, and soon the docks were abuzz with volunteers and naysayers alike. You're mad to attempt this, Kjartan, boomed Bjorn the Doubter, a hulking warrior with a reputation for caution. The ice will crush your ship like an eggshell. Others, like the shield maiden Astrid, were more enthusiastic. Count me in, Navigator. My axe thirsts for adventure, be it against men or monsters of the frozen north. As the sun began to dip towards the horizon, Kjartan stood before the assembled crowd. He could feel the weight of their expectations, their hopes, and their fears. Friends, warriors, fellow seekers of glory. His voice carried across the gathering. We stand at the threshold of a great adventure. Eric the Red's colony in Greenland has fallen silent, and we are called to uncover its fate. I won't lie to you. This journey will test us in ways we've never been tested before. We will face ice, storm, and perhaps enemies unknown to any Norse warrior. But we are Vikings. Our ancestors watch us from Valhalla, eager to see our deeds match their own. A cheer went up from the crowd, but Kjartan raised his hand for silence. I need a crew of the bravest and most skilled among you, those who fear neither the rage of the sea nor the bite of ice, those who would stare into the face of death itself and laugh. Who among you will join me? The response was immediate and overwhelming. Warriors, sailors, and even a few craftsmen surged forward, each eager to prove their worth. Kjartan's heart swelled with pride and determination. As the chosen crew began their preparations, Leif approached Kjartan once more. You've given them hope, Leif said quietly. But Kjartan, I must ask, what do you truly believe awaits you in Greenland? Kjartan's hand unconsciously went to the amulet hidden beneath his tunic. I believe, old friend, that the gods have set us on this path for a reason. Whether it leads to glory or doom, I cannot say, but I swear by Odin's eye that I will uncover the truth of your father's lost colony. The next morning dawned clear and cold, a good omen for the voyage ahead. Kjartan's ship, the Sea Wolf, stood ready at the dock, its dragon-headed prow snarling defiance at the challenges that lay ahead. The crew bustled about, securing supplies and making last-minute preparations. Kjartan oversaw it all, his keen eye missing nothing. As the time for departure drew near, a hush fell over the assembled crowd. Thorvald the priest stepped forward, his arms raised to the sky. Odin, Allfather, hear us. Bless this ship and these warriors as they venture into the unknown. May Thor's hammer shield them from harm, and may Njord grant them safe passage across his realm. And you, Kjartan the navigator, kneel. Kjartan knelt before the old priest, bowing his head. Thorvald dipped his fingers in a bowl of sacred water and traced the rune Raido, the rune of journeys, on Kjartan's forehead. May your course be true, your heart be steady, and your wisdom be as deep as Mimir's well. As Kjartan rose, he felt a surge of energy course through him. The doubts and fears of the past days fell away, replaced by an unshakable resolve. To the ships, he roared, and his crew answered with a mighty cheer. As the Sea Wolf pulled away from the dock, Kjartan took his place at the stern, his hand on the steering oar. The wind filled their sail and the dragon prow cut through the waves like a knife. Kjartan's eyes once again turned to the horizon, but this time it was not with longing, but with determination. Whatever awaited them in the icy reaches of Greenland, be it glory or doom, they would face it as Vikings, with courage in their hearts and steel in their hands. The great adventure had begun. The Sea Wolf cut through the waves like Odin's spear through the heart of a frost giant. 2 weeks had passed since they'd left the familiar shores of Nidaros, and already the air carried the bitter chill of the northern seas. Kjartan stood at the prow, his keen eyes scanning the horizon for any sign of the treacherous ice floes that could spell doom for their quest. Behind him, the crew worked with the precision of a war band, each man and woman knowing their role as if born to it. But beneath the surface of their efficiency, Kjartan could sense a growing unease. The further north they sailed, the more the old tales of ice demons and sea monsters seemed to take root in their minds. Kjartan! The call came from Astrid, the shield maiden who'd appointed herself as his second in command. Storm clouds gathering to the west. It's going to be a rough night. Kjartan nodded grimly. I see them. Tell the men to secure everything that's not nailed down. We're in for a dance with Rand tonight. As Astrid moved to carry out his orders, Kjartan caught sight of Bjorn the Doubter, the hulking warrior who'd been a thorn in his side since they'd set sail. The man's face was a mask of barely concealed contempt as he watched Kjartan from the middle of the ship. The first drops of rain began to fall as the sun dipped below the horizon, and with it came a wind that howled like a pack of wolves. The Sea Wolf bucked and heaved as waves the size of longhouses crashed over her sides. Hold fast, Kjartan roared over the storm's fury. She's a strong ship, and we're stronger still. For hours they battled against nature's wrath. Men and women who'd faced down armies now clung to the ship's sides, their faces pale with fear as lightning split the sky and thunder shook the very planks beneath their feet. In the midst of the chaos, Kjartan heard a cry of alarm. "Man overboard!" His heart seized. Without thinking, he grabbed a length of rope and dove into the churning sea. The cold hit him like a hammer blow, driving the air from his lungs. But through the stinging salt and driving rain, he caught sight of a flailing form, young Eric, barely more than a boy, being pulled under by the weight of his sodden furs. With powerful strokes, Kjartan cut through the water. He reached Eric just as the boy was about to slip beneath the waves for the last time. "I've got you, lad," he gasped, wrapping the rope around them both. "Pull us in," he bellowed towards the ship. Strong hands hauled them back onto the deck of the Seawolf. As Kjartan lay there, gasping for breath, he became aware of a hush that had fallen over the crew. The storm still raged, but something had changed. Bjorn the Doubter stepped forward, his massive frame silhouetted against the stormy sky. "You risked your life for the boy," he said, his voice gruff with an emotion Kjartan couldn't quite place. Perhaps I was wrong about you, Kjartan the Navigator." Before Kjartan could respond, a cry went up from the bow. "Ice! Ice ahead!" The moment of unity shattered as panic spread through the crew. Massive chunks of ice loomed out of the darkness, threatening to crush the Seawolf like a nutshell. "Steady!" Kjartan bellowed, pushing himself to his feet. "Astrid, take the steering oar. The rest of you, be ready with the poles. We'll thread this needle or die in the attempt." For what seemed like an eternity, they navigated the treacherous ice field. Every creak of wood, every scrape of ice against the hull, sent shivers of fear through the crew. But slowly, steadily, Kjartan's sure command and Astrid's skill at the oar guided them through. As they emerged from the ice into open water, a cheer went up from the exhausted crew. But their elation was short-lived. "Ship ahoy!" came the cry from the lookout. "Off the starboard bow!" Through the thinning rain they could make out the shape of another longship, its sail emblazoned with a blood-red raven. "Raiders!" Astrid spat. "They must have followed us, waiting for a moment of weakness." Kjartan's mind raced. His crew was exhausted, their ship battered by the storm. A fight now could spell the end of their quest before it had truly begun. "Weapons at the ready," he ordered. "But hold your attack. Let's see what they want." As the raider ship drew alongside, a figure stepped to its rail, a man as tall as Bjorn, with a beard like fire and eyes that glittered with cruel intelligence. "Well met, Kjartan the Navigator," the man called out, his voice carrying easily across the water. "I am Ivar the Red, and I've come to relieve you of your burden." Kjartan's hand tightened on the hilt of his sword. "And what burden would that be, Ivar the Red?" Ivar's laugh was like the crack of ice. "Why, the burden of this foolish quest, of course. Turn back now, hand over your supplies, and I'll let you limp home with your lives. Press on, and I'll feed you to the ice giants myself." A murmur ran through Kjartan's crew. He could sense their fear, their doubt. This was the moment that would make or break their journey. Kjartan stepped forward, his voice ringing out clear and strong. "Hear me, Ivar the Red, and hear me well. We are on a sacred quest, blessed by Odin himself. Every man and woman on this ship has sworn to see it through, come storm or ice or the armies of hell itself. If you stand against us, you stand against the will of the gods." He raised his sword high, the blade catching the first rays of the sun as it broke through the storm clouds. "We are Vikings. We spit in the face of death and laugh at impossible odds. So come if you dare, test your steel against ours, and we'll send you to the bottom of the sea to dine in Rand's hall." A roar went up from the Seawolf's crew, drowning out whatever response Ivar might have made. Kjartan saw the raider captain's face twist in fury, but there was fear there too. Fear of the fire he saw in the eyes of Kjartan's warriors. For a long moment, the two ships faced each other, balanced on the knife edge of violence. Then, with a snarl of frustration, Ivar barked an order to his men. The raider ship's sail filled with wind, and they turned away, quickly disappearing into the mists. As the tension bled out of the air, Kjartan felt a heavy hand on his shoulder. He turned to see Bjorn the Doubter, the big man's face solemn. "You spoke well, navigator," Bjorn rumbled. I was wrong to doubt you. My axe is yours from this day until Ragnarok." One by one, the rest of the crew came forward, pledging their loyalty anew. Kjartan felt a swell of pride and determination. They had faced storm and ice and the threat of battle, and had emerged stronger for it. As the sun rose higher, burning away the last of the storm clouds, Kjartan turned his gaze northward once more. Somewhere ahead lay Greenland and the mystery of the lost colony. Whatever challenges awaited them, he knew now that his crew would face them together, as true Vikings should. "Set full sail," he commanded. "Greenland awaits, and with it, our destiny." The sea wolf surged forward, cutting through the waves with renewed purpose. The first great test had been passed, but Kjartan knew in his heart that greater challenges lay ahead. Yet, as he looked at the determined faces of his crew, he felt a fierce joy. Come what may, they would meet it head-on, with courage in their hearts and the favor of the gods at their backs. The air grew colder with each passing day as the sea wolf pushed further north. Frost rimmed the ship's rails and crunched beneath the feet of the crew as they went about their duties. Kjartan stood at the prow, his eyes squinting against the biting wind, searching for any sign of land. "How much longer, Kjartan?" Astrid asked, coming to stand beside him. Her breath formed small clouds in the frigid air. "Soon," he replied, his voice low. "The birds have changed. See there?" He pointed to a flock of seabirds wheeling overhead. "Those are not the gulls of the open ocean. We're close." As if summoned by his words, a cry came from the lookout. "Land ho! Land to the north!" A ripple of excitement passed through the crew. After weeks at sea, the prospect of solid ground beneath their feet was intoxicating. But Kjartan's face remained grim. "Ready yourselves," he called out. "Greenland's shores are treacherous. We're not safe yet." As they drew closer, the true nature of their challenge became apparent. Great cliffs of ice rose from the sea, their faces glittering in the pale sunlight. Between them, narrow fjords cut into the land like the slashes of a giant sword. "By Thor's hammer," Bjorn breathed, coming to stand beside Kjartan. "How are we to find safe harbor in this frozen maze?" Kjartan's hand went to the amulet hidden beneath his furs. "We trust in the gods," he said, "and in our own skill. Astrid, take the steering oar. We'll need your steady hand." For hours they navigated the treacherous waters, the towering ice cliffs hemming them in on all sides. More than once they heard the ominous crack of ice, sending showers of frozen shards into the water around them. Just as the crew's nerves were stretched to breaking point, the fjord widened, revealing a sheltered bay. And there, nestled against the rocky shore, they saw the unmistakable signs of Norse settlement. "We've found it," Kjartan breathed. "Eric's colony." But as they drew closer, the sense of triumph gave way to unease. The settlement was silent. No smoke rose from the longhouses. No people moved on the shore. "It's abandoned," Astrid said, her voice barely above a whisper. Kjartan shook his head. "We don't know that yet. Prepare a landing party. We go ashore." As the first group rowed towards the shore in one of the ship's smaller boats, an eerie silence fell over them. The only sounds were the creak of oars and the soft lapping of waves against the hull. Kjartan was the first to step onto the rocky beach, his hand resting on the hilt of his sword. The others followed, weapons at the ready, eyes darting nervously. "Spread out," Kjartan ordered. "Search for any signs of life, but stay alert. Something's not right here." They moved through the abandoned settlement like ghosts. Longhouses stood empty, their doors hanging open. Tools lay where they had been dropped, now covered in a thick layer of frost. "Kjartan!" Bjorn's voice rang out. "Over here!" The big man stood before a large stone covered in runes. Kjartan approached, his heart pounding. As he read the inscription, he felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. "Beware," he translated, his voice hoarse. The ice brings death. The shadows hunger. Odin, save us. A low murmur of fear passed through the group. Astrid stepped forward, her face pale but determined. What does it mean, Kjartan? Before he could answer, a blood-curdling howl split the air. The Vikings spun, weapons raised to see a pack of wolves emerging from the shadows of the longhouses. But these were no ordinary wolves. Their eyes glowed with an unnatural blue light, and frost clung to their matted fur. Ice wolves, Kjartan breathed. The legends are true. Form a circle, Bjorn roared, his massive axe at the ready. Back to back. The wolves attacked with supernatural speed and ferocity. Kjartan's sword flashed in the pale light, biting deep into frozen flesh. Beside him, Astrid's spear danced, keeping the snarling beasts at bay. But for every wolf they struck down, two more seemed to take its place. The air was filled with the sounds of snarling beasts and shouting warriors. In the chaos, Kjartan heard a scream of pain. Young Eirik, the boy he had saved from the storm, had been pulled down by one of the creatures. Without hesitation, Kjartan leapt to his aid, his sword cleaving the wolf's head from its body. As he helped Eirik to his feet, Kjartan saw an opening. To the longhouse, he shouted. We can defend ourselves better inside. They fought their way through the pack, half dragging the wounded Eirik. Bjorn took up the rear, his mighty axe keeping the wolves at bay. With a final burst of speed, they reached the nearest longhouse, slamming the heavy door shut behind them. Inside, they could hear the wolves howling and scratching at the walls. But for the moment, they were safe. As they tended to their wounds, a heavy silence fell over the group. It was Astrid who finally spoke, her voice trembling slightly. What manner of evil is this, Kjartan? What happened to the people here? Kjartan looked around the abandoned longhouse, taking in the signs of a hasty departure. I don't know, he admitted. But I fear this is only the beginning of our troubles. Bjorn let out a bitter laugh. The beginning? We're trapped in an abandoned settlement, surrounded by demon wolves, with no idea what happened to the colonists. I'd say we're neck-deep in trouble already. Enough. Kjartan's voice cracked like a whip. We are Vikings by Odin's eye. We did not come all this way to cower in fear at the first sign of danger. He stood, drawing himself up to his full height. Yes, we face an unknown enemy. Yes, the odds are against us. But is that not why we came? To uncover the truth, no matter the cost? His words seemed to rekindle a fire in the eyes of his companions. Even Bjorn nodded grudgingly. So what now, navigator? Astrid asked, a hint of her old spirit returning to her voice. Kjartan moved to a dust-covered table, brushing away the grime to reveal a crude map scratched into the wood. We're here, he said, pointing to a mark on the coast. But look, there's another settlement marked further inland. If any of the colonists survived, that's where they would have gone. Through those mountains? Eirik asked, his young face pale with pain and fear. With those things out there? Kjartan placed a gentle hand on the boy's shoulder. We have no choice. We must press on, for the sake of those we left behind, and for our own honor. He turned to face the group, his eyes blazing with determination. Tomorrow we gather what supplies we can and set out for the inland settlement. Whatever secrets this frozen land holds, whatever dark forces we must face, we will meet them as Vikings, with courage in our hearts and steel in our hands. A ragged cheer went up from the group, drowning out the howls of the wolves outside. As Kjartan looked at the faces of his companions, tired, scared, but unbroken, he felt a surge of pride. The mystery of the lost colony still loomed before them, darker and more dangerous than they had ever imagined. But they would face it together, come what may. For they were Vikings, and this was the stuff of legend. The pale sun had barely crested the icy peaks when Kjartan and his band set out from the abandoned coastal settlement. Each step took them further into the heart of this frozen alien land. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the crunch of snow beneath their feet and the occasional distant howl that set their nerves on edge. Bjorn, ever the pragmatist, trudged alongside Kjartan. "We should have brought more men," he grumbled, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. Kjartan shook his head. "And leave the ship undefended? No, my friend. Our path lies ahead, not behind." As they crested a ridge, a vast expanse of tundra stretched before them, dotted with frozen lakes and stands of stunted trees. In the distance, dark mountains loomed, their peaks shrouded in mist. Astrid, her keen eyes scanning the horizon, suddenly stiffened. "Look there," she said, pointing to a distant smudge of darkness against the white landscape. Smoke? Hope surged through the group. Could it be survivors from the colony? But Kjartan's instincts urged caution. "We approach carefully," he ordered. "It could be friend or foe." As they drew nearer, the source of the smoke became clear, a small encampment of hide tents. But these were not Norse dwellings. Strange, angular patterns decorated the hides unlike anything they had seen before. Suddenly, a figure emerged from one of the tents. Short, stocky, clad in furs. Its face was weathered and dark, with slanted eyes that widened in surprise at the sight of the Vikings. "Skraelings," Eric whispered, using the Norse term for the native inhabitants of these lands. Before Kjartan could respond, more figures emerged from the tents, brandishing spears and bone knives. Their leader, a tall man with intricate tattoos covering his face, stepped forward. "Hold," Kjartan commanded his group, then turned to face the natives. He raised his empty hands, palms out, in a gesture of peace. "We mean you no harm," he said, knowing they likely wouldn't understand his words but hoping his tone would convey his meaning. The tattooed leader studied them for a long moment, his dark eyes inscrutable. Then, to everyone's surprise, he spoke in halting Norse. "Why you here? This place? Cursed." Kjartan's heart raced. Here at last was a clue to the mystery they sought to unravel. "We seek our people," he replied carefully. "A settlement to the north. Do you know of it?" The leader's face darkened. He spat on the ground and made a sign to ward off evil. "Bad place. Death walks there. You go, you die." Murmurs of unease rippled through Kjartan's group, but he pressed on. "What happened there? Please, we must know." The leader seemed to wrestle with himself for a moment, then beckoned Kjartan closer. "Come, I show you." Despite Bjorn's protests, Kjartan followed the man into one of the tents. Inside, the air was thick with the smell of smoke and strange herbs. The leader retrieved a small object wrapped in leather and reverently placed it in Kjartan's hands. As Kjartan unwrapped it, his breath caught in his throat. It was a Thor's hammer amulet, unmistakably Norse in design. But the metal was twisted and blackened, as if it had been subjected to unimaginable heat. "Found this," the leader said grimly, "after the Great Fire, after the screaming stopped." Kjartan's mind reeled. What catastrophe could have befallen the colony to cause such destruction? And yet, something didn't add up. "But the coastal settlement," he said. "It was abandoned, not destroyed." The leader's eyes widened in fear. "Coastal settlement empty? Then it begins again. The hunger awakens." Before Kjartan could ask what he meant, a commotion erupted outside. He rushed from the tent to find his companions facing off against a group of agitated natives. "Kjartan," Astrid called out, "they're saying we brought some kind of curse with us." The situation was balanced on a knife's edge. Kjartan could see the fear and anger in the native's eyes, mirrored by the tension in his own people. One wrong move could spark a bloodbath. Drawing himself up to his full height, Kjartan's voice rang out, clear and commanding. "Enough. We are not enemies here. We face a common threat, one that we must understand if we hope to survive." His words seemed to give both sides pause. The tattooed leader stepped forward, his face grave. "You speak truth, Norseman. But understand this, the evil that sleeps in the north is beyond your knowing. It hungers for the warmth of the living. It cannot be fought, only fled." Kjartan met the man's gaze steadily. My people do not flee, friend. We face our enemies, be they men or monsters. But we would welcome your wisdom in this fight. A long moment of silence followed. Then, to everyone's surprise, the leader nodded. I am Tulimak, he said. My people have lived in these lands since the world was young. We have seen the coming and going of many things. Perhaps it is time we joined our strength with others. Relief washed over Kjartan. Thank you, Tulimak. I am Kjartan, and these are my people. Together we will uncover the truth of what happened to our lost colony. As the two groups began to mingle cautiously, sharing food and stories, Kjartan felt a tugging on his sleeve. It was Eric, his young face pale with worry. Kjartan, the boy whispered, I've been having dreams, terrible dreams, of ice that moves like water and shadows that hunger. I think they're trying to tell me something. Kjartan knelt down, placing a reassuring hand on Eric's shoulder. Dreams can be powerful omens, lad. The gods often speak to us through them. Tell me everything you remember. As Eric recounted his nightmares, Kjartan felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. The boy's visions aligned too closely with the warnings they'd encountered, with the fears whispered by Tulimak and his people. Later, as the long northern twilight settled over the camp, Kjartan gathered his closest companions, Astrid, Bjorn, and Tulimak, around the fire. We face something beyond our understanding, he said quietly, but we cannot turn back. Too many lives depend on us uncovering the truth. Astrid nodded grimly. Whatever we find in the north, we face it together. Bjorn grunted his agreement, while Tulimak looked on with a mixture of fear and respect. Kjartan gazed into the flames, his mind racing with possibilities and dangers. Tomorrow they would set out for the inland settlement, armed with new allies and grave warnings. Whatever awaited them there, be it the remnants of the lost colony or something far darker, they would meet it as Vikings always had, with courage, strength, and the unshakable belief that their deeds would echo in the halls of Valhalla. As the night deepened and the aurora danced overhead, Kjartan offered a silent prayer to Odin for wisdom and to Thor for strength. They would need both in the days to come, for the true test of their quest was only just beginning. The dawn broke cold and gray as Kjartan's band, now joined by Tulimak and a handful of his bravest warriors, set out towards the inland settlement. The wind howled across the tundra, carrying with it the promise of a storm. Kjartan's eyes narrowed as he studied the distant mountains. There, he said, pointing to a narrow pass between two peaks. That must be the way to the inland fjord. Tulimak nodded grimly. The path of shadows, we call it. Many have entered, few return. Bjorn hefted his great axe, a wry smile on his weathered face. Then we shall be the few, Kjartan? As they approached the mountain pass, the air grew thick with an unnatural mist. Eirik, walking close to Kjartan, shivered visibly. It's just like in my dreams, the boy whispered. Kjartan placed a reassuring hand on Eric's shoulder, but his own heart was heavy with foreboding. Stay close, lad, and remember you carry the blood of warriors. The pass was narrow, forcing them to walk single file. Sheer cliffs of black rock rose on either side, their tops lost in the swirling mist. The only sound was the crunch of their footsteps on the frozen ground and the occasional skittering of unseen creatures in the shadows. Suddenly, Astrid, who was leading the way, held up a hand for silence. Look, she breathed, pointing to the cliff face. There, barely visible beneath a layer of frost, were strange markings carved into the rock. Runes, but unlike any Kjartan had ever seen. Tulimak's face paled. The writings of the old ones, he said, his voice hushed with awe and fear. They speak of a time before the ice, when great powers walked the earth. Kjartan traced the alien symbols with his fingers, feeling a strange tingling in his skin. Can you read them, Tulimak? The Skraeling shaman hesitated, then nodded. Some. They speak of a hunger that sleeps beneath the ice, of a curse that turns men's hearts to frozen stone. A chill ran through the group that had nothing to do with the biting wind. Bjorn's hand tightened on his axe. "Enough of this mystical nonsense," he growled. "We came to find our people, not to tremble at old tales." But even as he spoke, a sound echoed through the pass, a low, rumbling groan that seemed to come from the very earth itself. "Run!" Tulimak cried, his eyes wide with terror. They needed no second urging. As one, the band sprinted forward, just as great sheets of ice began to break away from the cliffs above. Massive chunks crashed down around them, shattering on the frozen ground. Kjartan's heart pounded in his chest as he ran, one hand gripping Eirik's arm to keep the boy moving. He could hear the labored breathing of his companions, the curses of Bjorn as he narrowly dodged a falling boulder of ice. Just when it seemed they could run no further, the pass widened, opening onto a vast, mist-shrouded valley. And there, nestled against the far shore of a frozen fjord, they saw it, the inland settlement. But any hope of a joyous reunion died in Kjartan's throat as they drew closer. The settlement was a scene of utter devastation. Longhouses lay in ruins, their timbers blackened and twisted. The ground was littered with debris and darker things that Kjartan tried not to look at too closely. "By Odin's eye," Astrid whispered, her face pale with shock. "What happened here?" As they picked their way through the ruins, a sense of wrongness grew in Kjartan's gut. The destruction was total, yet there were no bodies to be seen, no signs of the settlers who had called this place home. Tulimak knelt by one of the ruined buildings, his fingers tracing patterns in the ash. "The fire that burned here was no natural blaze," he said softly. "It burned cold." Bjorn snorted in disbelief. "Cold fire? Now I've heard everything." But Kjartan wasn't listening. His eyes were fixed on something half buried in the frozen mud, a glint of metal. With trembling hands, he brushed away the dirt to reveal a familiar sight. A Thor's hammer amulet, identical to the one Tulimak had shown him. As his fingers closed around it, a jolt of energy surged through him. Visions flashed before his eyes, screaming settlers, a darkness that moved like living shadow, and at the center of it all, a figure of ice and malevolence. Kjartan staggered, nearly falling. Astrid was at his side in an instant, steadying him. "What is it? What did you see?" Before he could answer, a bone-chilling howl split the air. From the ruins of the settlement, shapes began to emerge, twisted, ice-encrusted forms that might once have been human. "The cursed ones," Tulimak breathed, his voice thick with horror. "The lost souls of your people, trapped between life and death." Bjorn's axe was in his hands in an instant. "Then we shall free them, and send them to Valhalla." But as the creatures advanced, Kjartan saw the truth in their eyes. A hunger that no blade could satisfy, a cold that no fire could thaw. "No," he shouted, grabbing Bjorn's arm. "We can't fight them, not like this. We need to find shelter, to regroup." For a moment it seemed Bjorn would argue, but another look at the advancing horde changed his mind. "Where?" he growled. Eirik, his young face pale with fear but his eyes bright with determination, pointed to a structure at the far end of the settlement. "There, the great hall. Its walls still stand." They ran, the howls of the cursed ones nipping at their heels. Kjartan could feel the unnatural cold radiating from their pursuers, sapping his strength with every step. They reached the great hall just as the first of the creatures lunged for them. Bjorn and Astrid slammed the massive doors shut, bracing them with whatever debris they could find. Inside, in the gloom of the ruined hall, they caught their breath. The sounds of the creatures clawing at the doors sent shivers down their spines. "What now, Kjartan?" Astrid asked, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. "We're trapped." Kjartan looked around at his companions. Bjorn, grim-faced but resolute. Astrid, her shield ready. Eirik, trembling but brave. Tulimak and his warriors, their faces etched with a mixture of fear and determination. He felt the weight of the Thor's hammer in his hand, pulsing with an energy he didn't understand but knew was crucial to their survival. "Now," he said, his voice low but firm, "we unravel this curse. We find out what happened to our people, and we put an end to this evil." Tulimak nodded slowly. "The answers lie beneath, in the heart of the ice. But to go there is to risk your very soul." Kjartan met each of their gazes in turn, seeing in them the same mix of fear and resolve that he felt in his own heart. "We are Vikings," he said, his voice growing stronger with each word. "We do not shrink from danger or cower before the unknown. If our people are trapped in some half-life, then by Odin, we will free them or join them in their fate." A murmur of agreement ran through the group. Even Bjorn, ever the skeptic, nodded his approval. As the pounding on the doors grew louder, Kjartan raised the hammer amulet high. Its surface glowed with an inner light, pushing back the shadows that seemed to creep in from every corner. "Prepare yourselves," he commanded. "When those doors give way, we make for the heart of the settlement. Whatever power holds our people in thrall, whatever dark force has cursed this land, we face it together. For honor, for our people, and for the glory of the gods." A ragged cheer went up, drowning out for a moment the howls of the damned outside. As Kjartan looked at the determined faces around him, he felt a surge of pride and hope. They had come seeking a lost colony and found instead a battle against forces beyond their understanding. But they would face it as Vikings always had, with courage, with strength, and with the unshakable belief that their deeds would echo in the halls of Valhalla for all eternity. The final battle for the soul of Greenland was about to begin. The great hall creaked and groaned under the relentless assault of the cursed ones outside. Kjartan and his band huddled in the center, their weapons at the ready, eyes darting to every shadow. The air was thick with tension and the acrid smell of fear. Bjorn, his massive frame taut with barely contained energy, growled, "We can't stay here forever, Kjartan. We must fight." But Kjartan's eyes were fixed on the Thor's hammer amulet in his hand, its faint glow pulsing like a heartbeat. "Not yet," he murmured. "There's something we're missing." Suddenly, from the darkest corner of the hall, a voice rasped, "You seek answers, Norseman. Be careful. Some truths are better left buried in the ice." They whirled to face the speaker, weapons raised. From the shadows emerged a figure that made even hardened warriors gasp. It was a man, or what was left of one. His skin was pale as death, with veins of ice visible beneath. His eyes glowed with an unnatural blue light. Astrid's spear wavered. "By the gods. Are you one of the settlers?" The figure nodded, a sad smile twisting his frozen features. "I was Håkon once, steward of this cursed place. Now I am something else." Kjartan stepped forward, ignoring Tulimak's warning hiss. "Håkon, tell us what happened here. What curse has befallen our people?" Håkon's laugh was like breaking ice. "Curse? No, Norseman. What you see is no curse but a gift. Eternal life, freedom from the tyranny of warmth and flesh." His words sent a chill through the group. Eirik pressed closer to Kjartan, his young face pale with fear. Bjorn spat on the ground. "Gift? You call this abomination a gift? Where is the honor in this half-life?" Håkon's glowing eyes fixed on the big warrior. "Honor? What use is honor against the bitter cold, the gnawing hunger? We found something greater here, something that promised an end to all suffering." Kjartan's mind raced. "What did you find, Håkon? What power could do this?" But before Håkon could answer, a thunderous crack split the air. The doors of the great hall burst inward in a shower of splinters and ice. The cursed ones poured in, their frozen forms moving with unnatural speed. "To arms!" Kjartan roared, raising his sword high. The clash of steel on ice filled the air as they met the onslaught. Bjorn's mighty axe cleaved through the attackers, sending shards of frozen flesh flying. Astrid's spear danced, keeping the creatures at bay. Tulimak and his warriors fought with desperate ferocity, their bone knives finding weak points in the icy bodies. But for every creature they felled, Two more seemed to take its place. Kjartan felt the unnatural cold sapping his strength with every swing of his sword. In the chaos, he saw Håkon slipping away towards a trapdoor in the floor. "Stop him!" Kjartan shouted, but his voice was lost in the din of battle. Eirik, however, heard. The boy darted through the melee, ducking under swinging arms and leaping over fallen foes. With a desperate lunge, he grabbed Håkon's frozen ankle just as the steward was about to descend. Håkon turned, his face a mask of fury. He raised a hand crackling with icy energy, ready to strike the boy down. "No!" Kjartan's voice thundered through the hall. He thrust the glowing hammer amulet forward, and a wave of warmth pulsed out from it. The cursed ones recoiled, shrieking, and Håkon stumbled back from the trapdoor. In that moment of respite, Kjartan surveyed the scene. His companions were battered and bleeding, surrounded by the twitching forms of fallen attackers. But the tide of battle had turned. "Enough," he roared, his voice carrying the weight of command. "Håkon, call off your thralls. This madness ends now." For a long moment, the only sound was the ragged breathing of the survivors. Then, slowly, Håkon nodded. At some unspoken command, the remaining cursed ones retreated, melting into the shadows. As Astrid and Bjorn secured the broken doors as best they could, Kjartan approached Håkon. The steward's icy composure had cracked, revealing a deep weariness beneath. "Now," Kjartan said, his voice low and dangerous, "you will tell us everything." Håkon slumped against the wall, his glowing eyes dimming. "It began with the cold," he whispered. "A winter like no other. Our supplies ran low, our animals died. We were starving, freezing." His gaze turned inward, lost in memory. "That's when we found it. Deep in a cave of ice, a presence. It promised us salvation, an end to our suffering. We were fools. We embraced the cold, let it into our hearts. And now we are this." Tulimak stepped forward, his face grim. "The hunger that sleeps beneath the ice," he murmured. "The old tales speak of it, a spirit of cold and darkness as old as the world itself." Kjartan's hand tightened on the hammer amulet. "And this? What part does it play?" Håkon's eyes widened in fear at the sight of the amulet. "The warmth," he hissed. "It burns. It is anathema to our benefactor." Understanding dawned on Kjartan. "It's a key," he said softly. "A weapon against this evil." But as he spoke, a low rumble shook the hall. Cracks appeared in the floor, spreading outward from the trapdoor. Håkon's face twisted in a mixture of fear and ecstasy. "It comes," he whispered. "The master awakens." Panic gripped the group. Bjorn grabbed Kjartan's arm. "We must flee now, while we still can." For a moment Kjartan was tempted, the urge to run. To save themselves from this incomprehensible horror was almost overwhelming. But then he looked at Eirik, at the fear and hope warring in the boy's eyes. He thought of the lost settlers, trapped in this half-life, of the oath he had sworn to uncover their fate. "No," he said, his voice firm. "We end this, here and now." Astrid stepped to his side, her shield raised. "I'm with you, Kjartan." One by one, the others nodded their agreement. Even Bjorn, after a moment's hesitation, hefted his axe with a grim smile. Kjartan turned to Håkon, who was watching them with a mixture of awe and pity. "You were a leader once," Kjartan said. "Help us put an end to this madness. Help us free our people." Håkon's frozen features contorted in an internal struggle. Then, slowly, he nodded. "The way lies below," he said, gesturing to the trapdoor. "But be warned, what awaits us is beyond your darkest nightmares." As if in response to his words, another tremor shook the hall. The trapdoor burst open, releasing a blast of frigid air that carried with it the whispers of 1,000 tormented souls. Kjartan raised the hammer amulet high, its warm glow pushing back the encroaching darkness. "For our people," he said, his voice ringing with determination. "For honor. For redemption." With those words, He descended into the yawning darkness, his companions close behind. The final battle for the soul of Greenland, and perhaps for the fate of the world itself, was about to begin. As they disappeared into the depths, the howling wind seemed to carry the laughter of ancient, malevolent gods. The stage was set for a confrontation that would test not just their strength and courage, but the very limits of their humanity. The descent into darkness seemed endless. Kjartan led the way, the glow of the Thor's hammer amulet casting eerie shadows on the ice-slicked walls of the tunnel. Behind him came Astrid, her shield raised and ready, then Bjorn with his massive axe, followed by Eirik, Tulimak, and the others. Håkon brought up the rear, his unnatural blue eyes providing an additional unsettling source of light. The air grew colder with each step, a biting chill that seemed to seep into their very bones. Eric's teeth chattered audibly, and even the hardened warriors felt the cold gnawing at their resolve. "By Odin's frozen beard," Bjorn growled, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. "What manner of hell have we descended into?" As if in answer, the tunnel suddenly widened, opening into a vast cavern that took their breath away. Massive columns of ice stretched from floor to ceiling, glittering in the dim light like the pillars of some frozen giant's hall. At the center of the cavern stood an altar of black ice, radiating an aura of ancient, malevolent power. Tulimak's eyes widened in awe and fear. "The heart of the ice," he whispered. "The dwelling place of the hunger that never sleeps." Kjartan stepped forward, the hammer amulet pulsing more strongly now. As he approached the altar, strange symbols etched in the ice began to glow with an otherworldly blue light. "Runes," Astrid breathed, moving to Kjartan's side. "But like none I've ever seen." Hakon's voice rang out, filled with a mixture of reverence and dread. "The language of the old ones, those who walked the earth when it was young and cold. They speak of a power beyond mortal comprehension, a way to transcend death itself." Kjartan's eyes narrowed as he studied the glowing symbols. Transcend death? Or trap souls in an eternal frozen hell? Before anyone could respond, a low moan echoed through the cavern. From the shadows between the ice pillars, figures began to emerge, the missing settlers, their bodies twisted and changed by the power that dwelt in this place. Bjorn raised his axe with a snarl, but Kjartan held up a hand. "Wait," he commanded. "Look at their eyes." In the eerie blue glow of the cavern, they could see the truth. These were not the mindless, cursed creatures they had fought above. There was awareness in those eyes and an overwhelming sorrow. A woman stepped forward, her once beautiful face now a mask of ice and pain. "Kjartan," she said, her voice cracking like breaking icicles. "Is it truly you?" Kjartan's heart clenched as he recognized her. "Sigrid? Eric's daughter?" Sigrid nodded, a tear of ice trailing down her cheek. We thought we were saved. The cold was killing us, the hunger, and then we found this place. It promised us life eternal, an end to suffering." "But at what cost?" Kjartan asked gently. Sigrid's face contorted in anguish. "Our humanity, our souls. We are trapped, Kjartan, neither living nor dead, forever bound to this cursed place." Eirik, who had been silent until now, suddenly cried out, "Father! Mother!" He rushed forward towards two of the frozen figures who reached out to him with longing in their eyes. "No, lad," Bjorn shouted, grabbing the boy before he could touch them. "They're not what they were." Eirik struggled against Bjorn's grip, tears streaming down his face. "But we found them. We can save them." Kjartan felt the weight of leadership heavy on his shoulders. He turned to Håkon, his voice hard. You knew what awaited us here, what had become of our people. Why lead us into this trap?" Hakon's glowing eyes met Kjartan's unflinchingly. "Because you carry the key," he said, nodding towards the hammer amulet. "The warmth that can end our torment one way or another." A tremor ran through the cavern, and the glow of the runes on the altar intensified. A voice that was not a voice, ancient and cold as the void between stars, filled their minds. Warmth, life, Give it to me." The settlers moaned in unison, reaching out towards Kjartan and the amulet. Astrid and Bjorn moved to flank him, weapons ready. "What is this thing?" Kjartan demanded, his voice steady despite the fear clawing at his heart. "What do you want with us?" "Sustenance. Completion. Your warmth will feed me for 1,000 years." Tulimak stepped forward, his face a mask of grim determination. "The hunger that never sleeps," he intoned. "It feeds on the life force of the living, trapping their souls in eternal ice." Understanding dawned on Kjartan. The settlers, they're not just trapped, they're being consumed. Sigrid nodded, her eyes filled with a pain beyond tears. Slowly, endlessly, our warmth, our memories, everything that made us human, fed to the thing beneath the ice. Kjartan's mind raced. The hammer amulet glowed brightly in his hand, pushing back the encroaching darkness. He could feel its power, the warmth of life and hope it represented. "There must be a way to break this curse," he said, his voice rising with determination. "To free our people and end this abomination." Haken laughed bitterly. "Freedom? There is no freedom from this, Norseman. Only eternal cold or final oblivion." But Kjartan wasn't listening. His eyes were fixed on the altar, on the pulsing runes that seemed to draw the very warmth from the air around them. An idea, dangerous and desperate, began to form in his mind. "Astrid," he said quietly, "do you remember the tales of Surtur, the fire giant?" Astrid's eyes widened as she caught his meaning. "The cleansing fire that will consume the world at Ragnarok." Kjartan nodded grimly. "Sometimes to defeat the cold, one must embrace the flame." He turned to his companions, his voice ringing with the authority of a true leader. "My friends, we stand at the precipice. Before us lies an evil beyond imagining, a hunger that would consume not just our people, but all the warmth in the world if left unchecked." He raised the hammer amulet high, its glow intensifying as if in response to his words. "We came seeking our lost kin, and we have found them. Now we must free them, whatever the cost." Bjorn stepped forward, his massive frame taut with anticipation. "What would you have us do, Kjartan?" Kjartan's eyes blazed with a fire that seemed to push back the very darkness around them. "We fight. We break this curse or die in the attempt. For our people, for our gods, for the very warmth of life itself." A ragged cheer went up from his companions, echoed by the trapped settlers who sensed, perhaps for the first time in an age, a glimmer of hope. As they prepared for the final confrontation, the cavern trembled again. The voice that was not a voice filled their minds once more, this time tinged with something that might have been fear. "You cannot resist. You cannot prevail. The cold is eternal." Kjartan stood tall, the hammer amulet blazing like a miniature sun in his hand. "We are Vikings," he declared, his voice carrying the weight of generations of warriors and explorers. "We laugh in the face of impossible odds. We spit in the eye of death itself. And we will not go quietly into your endless night." With those words, Kjartan strode towards the altar, the power of the amulet pulsing in sync with his determined heartbeat. The final battle for the soul of Greenland, and perhaps for the fate of the world itself, was about to begin. The cavern shuddered as Kjartan approached the altar, each step sending ripples of power through the ancient ice. The trapped settlers moaned in unison, their frozen forms swaying like reeds in a bitter wind. Astrid and Bjorn flanked Kjartan, weapons at the ready, while Eirik, Tulimak, and the others formed a protective circle around them. Haken watched from the shadows, his glowing eyes flickering between hope and terror. "Be careful, Norseman," he rasped. "The power here is beyond your comprehension." Kjartan's grip tightened on the hammer amulet, its warmth a stark contrast to the biting cold that surrounded them. "Perhaps," he replied, his voice steady, "but we Vikings have never shied away from the unknown." As they neared the altar, the runes carved into its surface pulsed with an otherworldly light. The voice that was not a voice filled their minds once more, a cacophony of ice and hunger. You dare approach the heart of winter? You are but morsels, warmth to be consumed. Bjorn snarled, hefting his massive axe. I'll show you consumption, ice demon. He swung with all his might at the altar, but his blade bounced off harmlessly, sending shockwaves up his arms. Astrid pulled him back. Steel won't harm it, you great oaf. This is a battle of wills, of spirit. Kjartan nodded grimly. He raised the hammer amulet high, its glow intensifying until it rivaled the eerie blue light of the cavern. In the name of Thor, bringer of thunder, and protector of mankind, I command you to release these souls. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like a glacier calving, cracks appeared in the surface of the altar. The trapped settlers cried out, a mixture of pain and hope in their voices. Sigrid stumbled forward, her icy form trembling. Kjartan, please, end this. Free us, whatever the cost. Eric broke from the protective circle, rushing to his parents. Father, Mother, hold on, we'll save you. But as the boy reached out to touch them, tendrils of ice shot from the ground, wrapping around his legs. He cried out in pain and surprise as the cold began to creep up his body. No! Kjartan roared. He thrust the amulet towards Eirik, and a wave of warmth pulsed out, shattering the ice tendrils. Bjorn scooped up the shivering boy, pulling him back to safety. The voice that was not a voice howled in fury. The child's warmth will be mine. All will be consumed. The cavern shook violently, ice spears erupting from the ground and walls. Astrid deflected them with her shield while Tulimak and his warriors dodged and weaved, their agility saving them from impalement. Kjartan stood his ground, the amulet blazing in his hand. He could feel its power coursing through him, a warmth that pushed back against the encroaching cold. But with each pulse of energy, he felt his own strength ebbing. Kjartan, Astrid called out, concern evident in her voice. Whatever you're planning, do it now. We can't hold out much longer. He knew she was right. Already frost was forming on Bjorn's beard, and Eirik's lips were turning blue. Even Tulimak, used to the harsh northern climes, was shivering uncontrollably. Kjartan took a deep breath, steeling himself for what he knew he had to do. He turned to his companions, his eyes filled with a mixture of determination and sorrow. My friends, he said, his voice carrying over the howling wind that now whipped through the cavern. I know now what must be done, but the price will be high. Bjorn stepped forward, understanding dawning on his face. No, Kjartan, there must be another way. But Kjartan shook his head. The amulet is the key, as Håkon said. It carries the warmth of life, the power to break this curse. But that power needs a vessel, a willing sacrifice to channel it. Astrid's eyes widened in horror. You can't mean to. I do, Kjartan said softly. It's the only way to free our people, to end this threat to all the warmth in the world. Before anyone could stop him, Kjartan turned and strode purposefully towards the altar. The voice that was not a voice shrieked in his mind, a mixture of triumph and terror. Yes, come. Give yourself to the cold. Join us in eternity. But Kjartan smiled, a fierce, defiant grin that seemed to push back the very shadows. Oh, I'll join you, he growled, but not in the way you expect. With a mighty roar, Kjartan raised the hammer amulet high and brought it down on the altar with all his strength. The cavern exploded with light, a blinding flash that forced everyone to shield their eyes. When they could see again, they gasped in awe and horror. Kjartan stood atop the shattered altar, his body wreathed in flames. The amulet had merged with his chest, its glow pulsing in time with his heartbeat. Kjartan, Astrid cried out, taking a step forward, but the heat emanating from him was too intense to approach. Kjartan turned to face his friends, his eyes now glowing with the same fire that consumed him. When he spoke, his voice echoed with power. The fire of Surtur, the cleansing flame of Ragnarok, he intoned. It burns within me now, fueled by my life force. With it, I will burn away this curse and free our people. The trapped settlers began to change before their eyes. The ice that had consumed them melted away, revealing their human forms once more. They gasped and cried out, feeling warmth for the first time in an age. But the voice that was not a voice wasn't finished. It howled in rage and desperation. No, you cannot. The cold is eternal. I am eternal. Kjartan laughed, a sound of pure defiance. Nothing is eternal, ice demon, not even you. He plunged his hands into the remnants of the altar, and the entire cavern began to shake. Cracks spread across the floor and walls, steam hissing from them as the very foundations of the ice began to melt. Go, Kjartan shouted to his companions. Take our people and flee. This place will be their tomb no longer. Bjorn hesitated, torn between obedience and the desire to stand with his friend. Kjartan, we can't leave you. But Astrid, tears streaming down her face, grabbed Bjorn's arm. We must, she said. His sacrifice cannot be in vain. As they began to usher the freed settlers towards the exit, Eric broke free and ran to Kjartan's side. Take me with you, the boy cried. I want to be brave, like you. Kjartan's fiery gaze softened as he looked at Eric. You are brave, lad. But your story is just beginning. Mine is ending. Live, Eric. Live and remember. With a gesture, Kjartan sent a wave of warmth that gently pushed Eric back to the others. Astrid scooped up the protesting boy, and with one last anguished look at Kjartan, led the exodus from the cavern. Left alone with the dying ice demon, Kjartan closed his eyes and embraced the fire that burned within him. He thought of his people, now free, of the warmth of the sun on his face, the laughter of friends around a fire, of all the things worth protecting in this world. For Midgard, he whispered, for life itself. And with those words, Kjartan the navigator, hero of the Greenland expedition, gave himself fully to the cleansing flame. The cavern erupted in a conflagration that could be seen for miles, a beacon of defiance against the eternal cold. As Astrid, Bjorn, and the others emerged into the blinding daylight, they turned to see the mountain collapsing in on itself. And in that moment they swore they could hear the triumphant laughter of Kjartan echoing across the frozen wastes of Greenland. The curse was broken, the lost colony was found, and the legend of Kjartan the Flamebearer was born, a tale that would be told around Viking hearths for generations to come. The world above was a maelstrom of ice and fire. As Astrid led the survivors out of the collapsing cavern, they emerged into a landscape transformed. The once frozen fjord was a churning cauldron of steam and melting ice, the very foundations of Greenland seeming to shake with the death throes of the ancient evil below. Bjorn, carrying the weakest of the freed settlers on his broad back, roared over the cacophony, "To the ship! If it still stands, it's our only hope." They ran, stumbling over the treacherous melting ground. The freed colonists, weak from their long imprisonment, leaned heavily on their rescuers. Eirik, tears streaming down his face, kept looking back at the mountain that had become Kjartan's pyre. Astrid's heart was a storm of emotions. Grief for Kjartan, relief at their escape, and a gnawing fear that their trials were not yet over. As they crested a ridge, she saw their ship in the distance, still miraculously intact amidst the chaos. "There," she cried, pointing. "We're almost there." But fate, it seemed, had one last challenge for them. As they descended towards the shore, a bone-chilling howl split the air. From the mists emerged a pack of ice wolves, their eyes glowing with unnatural hunger. "By Odin's eye," Tulimak gasped, "the last vestiges of the curse." Bjorn set down his burden and hefted his great axe. "Then we'll break this curse as Kjartan broke the last, with steel and courage." The wolves attacked in a frenzy, their frozen fangs gleaming. Astrid's spear danced, keeping the beasts at bay while the weakened settlers scrambled towards the ship. Bjorn's axe cleaved through ice and flesh alike, each mighty swing accompanied by a battle cry that would have made the gods themselves take notice. In the chaos of the fight, Astrid saw Eric standing alone, facing down one of the largest wolves. The boy's face was a mask of determination as he raised a broken spear shaft. "Eric, no," Astrid cried, fighting to reach him. But as the wolf leaped, something extraordinary happened. The amulet around Eric's neck, the one Kjartan had given him, began to glow with the same fierce light they had seen in the cavern. A wave of warmth pulsed out from the boy, and the ice wolf shattered mid-leap, its frozen form dissolving into harmless mist. Eric stood there, shocked at what he had done. The remaining wolves backed away, whimpering before fleeing into the mists. Astrid reached the boy, kneeling before him. "Eric," she said softly, "the amulet. Kjartan's power lives on in you." The boy looked down at the glowing amulet, then back at Astrid, his eyes wide with wonder and responsibility. "What do I do now?" he asked, his voice small but steady. Astrid smiled, a fierce pride shining through her exhaustion. "We finish what Kjartan started. We break this curse once and for all." With renewed determination, they made their way to the ship. As the last of the survivors clambered aboard, Astrid turned to face the island. The mountain where Kjartan had made his final stand was now a smoldering ruin, steam and smoke rising into the sky. "We can't leave yet," she declared. "The curse still lingers. If we go now, it might eventually regain its strength." Bjorn, bleeding from a dozen wounds but standing tall, nodded grimly. "Aye. But how do we end it for good?" Tulimak stepped forward, his weathered face solemn. "The boy," he said, pointing to Eirik. "He carries the flame now. He must use it to cleanse this land as Kjartan cleansed the cavern." All eyes turned to Eirik. The boy stood straighter, his chin lifted in a gesture so reminiscent of Kjartan that Astrid felt her heart clench. "I'll do it," Eirik said, his young voice ringing with determination. "For Kjartan, for all of us." Astrid knelt before him, placing her hands on his shoulders. "You don't have to do this alone, Eirik. We're with you." The boy nodded, grateful for her support. Then with a deep breath, he raised the amulet high. As if responding to his will, it began to glow brighter, pulsing with a warmth that pushed back the lingering cold. Eirik closed his eyes, concentrating. When he spoke, his voice seemed to carry echoes of Kjartan's strength. "I am the heir of Kjartan the Flame-Bearer," he intoned. "By the power of Thor's hammer, by the warmth of life itself, I banish the eternal cold from this land." A wave of heat exploded outward from the amulet, washing over the island. Where it touched, ice melted and the unnatural chill in the air dissipated. The very ground seemed to sigh in relief, as if a great weight had been lifted. But the effort was taking its toll on Eirik. The boy swayed, his face pale with exhaustion. Astrid caught him as he stumbled, cradling him gently. "You did it, Eirik," she whispered. "The curse is broken." As if in confirmation, a ray of sunlight broke through the clouds that had shrouded the island for so long. The survivors gasped in wonder as warmth touched their faces for the first time in years. Bjorn laughed, a sound of pure joy. "By the gods, I never thought I'd be so happy to feel sweaty." The freed settlers embraced each other, weeping and laughing. Parents hugged children they had thought lost forever. Friends reunited after years of icy imprisonment. Astrid, still holding the exhausted Eirik, felt a presence beside her. She turned to see Sigrid, Eric's mother, her eyes filled with tears of gratitude. "Thank you," Sigrid said softly, "for saving us, for giving my son the strength to be a hero." Astrid shook her head. The strength was always in him. Kjartan just helped him find it. As the sun climbed higher, bathing the island in golden light, Astrid gathered the survivors. "We've won a great victory here," she declared, "but our journey is not over. We must return home to tell the tale of Kjartan's sacrifice and the breaking of the curse." Bjorn raised his axe high. "Aye, let the skalds sing of this day for generations to come. of Kjartan the Flamebearer and Eirik the Cursebreaker. A cheer went up from the crowd. As they prepared the ship for the long journey home, Astrid stood at the prow, looking back at the transformed island. The once frozen wasteland was now alive with the promise of spring, green shoots already pushing through the melting snow. "Rest well, Kjartan," she whispered to the wind. "Your fire burns on in all of us." With a final look at the island that had been both their greatest challenge and their greatest triumph, Astrid gave the order to set sail. As the ship caught the wind, carrying them back towards the lands of their people, she felt a sense of both ending and beginning. The curse of the eternal cold was broken, but the legend of the lost colony of Greenland, and the heroes who saved it, was just beginning. It would be a tale told around fires and in great halls, a story of courage, sacrifice, and the indomitable spirit of the Viking people. And somewhere, in the halls of Valhalla, Astrid was sure that Kjartan was raising a horn of mead, proud of the legacy he had left behind. The longship cut through the waves, its dragon prow pointing steadfastly towards home. The sails, once white, now bore the marks of their incredible journey, patched with furs and stained with the smoke of Kjartan's final battle. At the stern, Astrid stood at the steering oar, her eyes fixed on the horizon. The weight of leadership sat heavy on her shoulders, but she bore it with the strength of one who had faced down the very essence of winter and emerged victorious. Bjorn approached, his massive frame casting a shadow over the deck. "How much longer, do you reckon?" he asked, his voice gruff but tinged with an uncharacteristic weariness. Astrid squinted at the sun, calculating. 3 days, perhaps 4 if the winds turn against us. We're nearly home, old friend." Home, the word hung in the air between them, laden with emotion. For the freed settlers it was a promise almost too sweet to believe. For Astrid and her companions, it was a bittersweet reminder of all they had lost and gained on this perilous quest. On the main deck, Eirik sat surrounded by a group of children, both from the original crew and the rescued settlers. His young voice carried on the sea breeze as he recounted their adventures. "And then Kjartan raised the hammer amulet high," Eirik said, his eyes shining with a mixture of pride and sorrow. "And he became living fire itself. The ice demon howled in terror as Kjartan's flames melted away centuries of evil." The children gasped in awe, their faces a mixture of wonder and fear. One small girl, no more than 6 summers old, piped up, "But weren't you scared, Eirik?" Eric's face grew solemn. "I was," he admitted, "but Kjartan taught me that being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid. It means you face your fears and do what's right anyway." Astrid felt her heart swell with pride. The boy had grown so much in such a short time. She caught Sigrid's eye across the deck, and the 2 women shared a moment of understanding. Eirik had lost a mentor but gained a legacy. As the day wore on, the mood on the ship oscillated between jubilation at their victory and somber reflection on the cost. Tulemak and his remaining warriors kept to themselves, their eyes often turned back towards the Greenland they had left behind. The land was forever changed, both by the breaking of the curse and by the knowledge that their isolated world was not as alone as they had believed. As night fell, Astrid called the leaders of their expedition together. In the flickering light of a shielded lantern, their faces looked haggard but determined. "We'll be home soon," Astrid began, her voice low but steady. "We must decide how to tell our tale. The Althing will want a full accounting, and our people deserve to know the truth of what happened." Bjorn grunted, absently running a hand over his axe. "Aye, but will they believe it? Ice demons and cursed settlers? It sounds like the ravings of a madman." Sigrid, who had become a voice for the freed settlers, spoke up. "They must believe it. Our suffering, Kjartan's sacrifice, it cannot be in vain. The North must be warned of the dangers that sleep beneath the ice." Tulemak nodded solemnly. "My people have carried the old stories for generations. Perhaps it is time for all to know them, to stand united against the darkness." Astrid looked at each of them in turn, seeing the resolve in their eyes. Then we tell the truth. All of it. But more than that, we must ensure that Kjartan's legacy lives on. The flame he ignited in us, the warmth that broke the curse, we carry that now, in our hearts and in our actions. A murmur of agreement passed through the group. As they dispersed, Eric approached Astrid, the amulet around his neck glowing softly in the darkness. "Astrid," he said, his young face serious, "what happens when we get home? What do I do with this power?" Astrid knelt down to meet his eyes. "You live, Eric. You grow strong and wise, and you use this gift to protect our people, just as Kjartan did. His strength lives on in you, but it's your choice how to wield it." Eric nodded, a small smile breaking through his serious expression. "I'll make him proud. I'll make all of you proud." As Eric walked away, Astrid felt a presence beside her. It was Håkon, the once cursed steward, his eyes no longer glowing with unnatural light but still carrying the weight of centuries. "You've given them hope," Håkon said softly. "Something I failed to do so long ago." Astrid studied him, seeing the guilt and regret etched in every line of his face. "We all make choices, Håkon. What matters is what we do with the chances we're given. You have a new life now. Use it well." Håkon bowed his head, a tear glinting in the lantern light. "I will. For Kjartan, and for all those we lost." The next few days passed in a blur of anticipation and preparation. Astrid drilled the crew and passengers on the story they would tell, ensuring that every detail was clear and consistent. They could not afford to have their tale dismissed as mere fantasy. On the dawn of the fourth day, a cry went up from the lookout. "Land ho! Shores of home ahead!" A cheer erupted from the ship, settlers and crew alike rushing to the rails to catch a glimpse of their homeland. Astrid felt a lump form in her throat as the familiar coastline came into view. They had left these shores as seekers, venturing into the unknown. They returned as heroes, forever changed by their journey. As they approached the harbor, they could see a crowd gathering on the docks. Word of their return had spread quickly. Astrid took a deep breath, squaring her shoulders. "Ready the ship for landing," she commanded. "Bjorn, Sigrid, Eirik, with me at the prow. Tulimak, if you would join us as well. It's time to face our people." As the ship glided into the harbor, a hush fell over the crowd. Astrid could see the mixture of joy, relief, and confusion on their faces. How does one begin to explain such a journey? With a deep breath, Astrid raised her voice, letting it carry across the water. "People of the North, we have returned from Greenland bearing a tale of darkness and light, of curse and salvation. We bring with us the lost settlers of Eric's colony, freed from an evil older than time itself." A murmur ran through the crowd. Astrid pressed on, her voice growing stronger with each word. "We have faced the heart of winter and emerged victorious, thanks to the sacrifice of Kjartan the Navigator, now known as Kjartan the Flame Bearer." She gestured to Eirik, who stepped forward, the amulet glowing visibly even in the daylight. "His legacy lives on, a flame to push back the darkness, a warmth to protect us all from the terrors that lurk in the frozen wastes." As the ship docked and they disembarked, the crowd surged forward. There were cries of joy as families were reunited, gasps of awe as the freed settlers stepped onto solid ground for the first time in years. Questions flew thick and fast, but Astrid held up a hand for silence. "Our tale is long and strange," she said, her voice carrying the weight of their journey. "But it must be told in full. Gather the Althing, call the Skalds. Let all hear of the lost colony of Greenland, of the curse that nearly doomed us all, and of the heroes who gave everything to break it." As the crowd began to disperse, preparing for the great telling, Astrid felt a small hand slip into hers. She looked down to see Eirik, his young face set with determination. "We're home," he said simply. "But our journey's not really over, is it?" Astrid squeezed his hand, looking out over the bustling port at the faces of their people. Curious, afraid, but alive with the possibility of the tale they were about to hear. "No, Eirik," she said softly. In many ways, it's just beginning. And so, as the sun climbed high over the fjords of their homeland, Astrid and her companions prepared to share their epic tale. The story of the lost colony of Greenland would be etched into the sagas, a testament to the courage of those who dared to face the unknown, and a warning of the ancient powers that slumbered in the frozen north. Jartan's sacrifice, Eirik's awakening, the breaking of the eternal winter, all would become legend. And in that legend, the spirit of the Viking people would live on, forever ready to push back the darkness with the flame of courage and the warmth of hope.